this table for the week to practice this club talk. So, Abby, I'm sorry if you guys needed it on Sunday or something.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Oh, sweet. Perfect. Okay. Awesome. So, we've been talking this whole semester. We've been talking about a guy named Jesus. And last week, Carly started talking about this problem that we got, right? Sorry, I'm not looking at you all. I gotta set up. But Carly started talking about this problem that we got. And this problem is that we have these needs, and for some reason, everything in the world doesn't solve that problem, right? And so, no matter what we turn to, everything just eventually breaks or doesn't fill that hole that we have. And so, tonight I'm going to talk to you guys about another problem. I'm sorry I got to start a second week of bad news. But I think this problem is more important than that last problem. And I think this problem, we could even diagnose it as the root of last week's problem. But before I start talking about the problem, I'm going to talk about a time when the problem didn't exist. Alright, so this is the Bible. And if you don't own one of these and you want to, let a leader know. We can figure that out for you. But so this book tells the story of God and his relationship with humankind. And on page 1, it starts by saying that God was all by himself, and God began to create things. So he created the heavens and the earth. He created the whole universe. He created all the animals, all the plants. But then it says that God created man and woman. He created humankind. And so he changes the verbiage at this point. And he says that he formed Adam and Eve, the first two humans. He formed them in his hands, which is just like a very intimate image and a very intentional image. And so God intimately and intentionally created humankind for three things. And those three things are, one, to enjoy the beautiful and abundant creation that he had made. Right? So he made all this stuff, and he wanted them to be kings and queens of it and enjoy it. Another thing was to enjoy each other. Right? So Adam and Eve were day ones. Right? They were literally a match made in heaven. And so they were perfect for each other. They knew everything about each other. And so God made humankind to enjoy each other. But God also made humankind to enjoy him and be with him. And so I could represent God with just a bigger Play-Doh person. But just because in the Bible it says that humankind was created in God's image. But I'm going to draw from a different place to represent God. So in 1 John chapter 1, verse 5, it starts this metaphor that says, God is light. So I'm going to use this lamp right here to represent God. And so God is light. And so we could have God's posture be this, that he's just up here all the time. But God created us not to always be up here, but because he loved to be down here with us. So in Genesis chapter 3, it talks about one time when God was walking in the garden to find Adam and Eve. And so God wanted to be down here with us. But if you were here last week, or if you're just an observant person, you notice that this isn't the world that we have. Right? That's what Carly talked about last week. We don't have fullness and abundance. We have needs that aren't met. We aren't perfectly with each other, right? We have enemies. And I don't know about y'all, but I haven't seen God walking around Lexington. And so for some reason, this isn't what we have. And so this book on page 1 tells this story, but then on page 2, it talks about how this all changed. And so in the garden, God had one rule, and that was not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And so it was just one rule, is very clearly defined, and the consequences were clearly defined too. So God said, do not eat from this tree or surely you will die. So simple enough, right? And so here we are living in paradise, and then a new character comes in on page 2 in Genesis chapter 3, and that character is a serpent, and he's a tempter, and his name was Satan. And he convinces Adam and Eve to take this fruit and take a bite, even though they knew what the consequences were. And so the moment they ate from this apple, something was introduced into this perfect world, this paradise. And that thing was called sin. And so shortly after this, God banishes Adam and Eve from the garden. And it's not because he didn't love them. Alright? Hear me say that. He doesn't banish Adam and Eve from being with him because he didn't love them. But he banishes them from the garden because of this. So, back in 1 John chapter 1, verse 5, that metaphor started. It says that God is light. But it also says, and in him there's no darkness at all. And so light, it's light's nature to expose things, right? To make things visible. That's why we use a flashlight to find the light switch. But then things, it's in their nature to cast a shadow. And maybe Cam, could you? All right, let's keep this here. And so, light exposes things. Things cast shadows. And so, if God is light and in him there's no darkness, that means once Adam and Eve were thrown into darkness, they're thrown into this shadow. God just couldn't be with them anymore. And that's why they were banished from the garden. But this wouldn't be important to talk to y'all about tonight if it was just Adam and Eve's problem, right? So let's stop thinking about this as Adam and Eve and start thinking about it as you and me. And so, I don't know about y'all, but I haven't eaten from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But there might be something else in our lives that casts a shadow on our lives, right? And so maybe there are these things that we know are obviously bad, right? So there are these things that we hide from people. We hide from our parents or our friends because our parents would ground us forever if they knew. Or our parents would disown us if they knew. Or our friends would stop hanging out with us because we would become too much to handle. You know, maybe they are things like substance abuse, right? Maybe we get drunk, or maybe we get high. One guy's missing. Maybe that's what casts a shadow in our life, or maybe it's being lazy. You know, maybe we are too afraid to fail, so we just don't even try. Or maybe that laziness is bad grades. I got 20% on this test. Or maybe we're angry all the time, you know? Maybe we're always picking fights. Or maybe we're just mean. Maybe we hurt people. I'm gonna do that. Maybe we're just mean. Maybe we hurt people. Or maybe we're always worried or sad. And so we know we don't want these things in our lives because we hide them from people, or because we hate these things so much we just wish that they weren't in our life anymore. But maybe you're looking up here and you say, nah, none of that's me. And so maybe for you, it's not things that are obviously bad, but it's good things that are done badly. Right? So maybe for you, it's sex. And so God made sex to be pleasurable and to bring two people close together. But when we have sex outside of marriage, when we have sex outside of the promise of, I am going to love you forever, and I will promise you that in front of all my friends and my family and our God. When that happens, you just take a huge risk. Huge risk of getting hurt. Or maybe for you, it's not sleeping with someone that you're not married to, but it's something like pornography and masturbation. And so this thing that was supposed to bring two people together just leaves you alone and ashamed. Or maybe it's not sex at all. Maybe for you it's food. And so food is this good thing that God made to be enjoyed and to provide nourishment for us. Right? But maybe you use food to control your mood. And so you overeat to feel better. But you end up not feeling better because you overate. And then you just end up loathing yourself. Or maybe for you, it's not that you overeat, but it's that you eat too little. And there's this ideal weight that you've been wanting to attain. And maybe you try to attain that not a safe way, like substituting breakfast for Slim Fast, but maybe you don't eat. Or maybe you throw up after you eat. Or maybe it's not that you are too big, but it's that you're too small. And so you spend all your days at the gym trying to make yourself something, trying to make yourself a first string. You do 3 scoops of protein a day just to be somebody. But you know what? Maybe it's not good things that are done badly. And maybe it's not things that are obviously bad. But maybe it's good things that you've given too much importance in your life. And so God calls this idolatry. And this is not a problem of action, right? So idolatry can be like really great things. But this is a problem of prioritization. And so when we make things that are not as important as God, when we put those things in between us and God, it's obvious how they're going to cast a shadow in our life. So maybe for you, that's grades. This is that same class. Got a 95 on that one. Maybe for you, that's success. You know, maybe for you, that's money. God says you can't worship God and money, and I think that's absolutely true. Maybe for you, that's being nice. You know, maybe if that wasn't a part of your identity, that would just kill you. Maybe for you, it's being good looking or handsome or beautiful. And that's the only important thing. Or maybe for you, it's a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a prom date or always having unread Snapchats from girls or boys or always talking to people. And so it's super obvious to see the effect that this has on our lives. And I'm pretty confident that all of us can look up here and see at least one thing that casts a shadow in our lives. And I'm pretty confident that just from personal experience. So I look up here and I see several things that cast a shadow in my life. But I'm also confident in saying that because I believe that what this book says is true. And in Romans 3:23, it says, "For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God." So all of us have sinned. All of us are in the shadows. And so that's just how things are, right? So light by its nature, God by his nature, exposes things, exposes our sin. And that sin casts a shadow in our life and then makes us darkness, makes us not light. And so sin separates us from God. And I believe that separation is eternal. Because God is immortal. God is forever. God was before us and will be after us. But just 3 verses later from that one verse that we just read that said, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Sorry, 3 chapters later. So in Romans 6:23, it says that the wages of sin is death. So if we are underneath an immortal God, and we are mere mortals, and the wages of this is death. If we are in the shadows, we deserve death. If that is the case, then this separation is eternal. And so I really hate having to talk to y'all about this. I really hated having to study this. Right? But I just want to say something. One thing is help is on the way. Right? So I don't have enough time tonight to talk about everything. And so we're going to have to push it back to next week. And then the other thing I want to say is that God still wants this. I promise you that. Right? God still wants this. But the situation we are all in right now is this. And so I just want to say, I've got something to tell you guys next week that might change this situation. It might change the situation for you. And so I beg you to come back. Or if you can't come back, talk to a leader or a junior senior discipleship kid about what we talk about next week. Or if you have a question tonight, talk to a leader. Or if you are scared tonight, talk to a leader. Please come back next week. Please ask questions if you got them. I love y'all. And that's why I gotta tell you all this. So I'm sorry to leave things at such a heavy spot, but I'm gonna pray real quick, and then we're all gonna go to McDonald's.
Wait. All right.
Oh, right here, Connor. Not right